Brilliant. So, welcome everyone. This is our fourth live chat of the day, and although I've loved every single one so far, I've got a sweet little excitement in me about this one. I'm really. I've got the pleasure to introduce so many people to such a wonderful woman who, along with her friend Nikki, have started to transform the idea of care for people living with dementia, not only in hospitals but now nursing homes and care homes around the country. So I will introduce you as Julia Jones, co-founder of John's Campaign. But Julia, do you want to introduce yourself and let us know what John's Campaign is all about?
Well, I'm a bit overwhelmed actually, Adam, after an introduction like that. I wish John's Campaign didn't exist. And I wish there wasn't a sort of irony to this being Care Home Open Day when care homes, and hospitals indeed are not as open as we would long for them to be. Because the sad thing is that John's Campaign started with infection control. And I would say misplaced infection control, because I mean, you know the story, Adam, but I'll just tell it. Here's a picture. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep. That's my friend Nikki, who is just wonderful, and we've done this all together. And there she is with her father, Dr. John Gerard, and he was living with dementia, living at home, with support. And, doing fine. But then he had to go into hospital. This was 2014, to have something done to his leg ulcers or something. It was intravenous antibiotics, which lots of people, do have to go into hospital for. And unfortunately, it coincided with a norovirus outbreak in the hospital. So it was a hospital that already had restricted visiting. And so they just said, right, that's it, no visitors. And there was no sort of thought about what this might mean. And to be sadly fair to Nikki and her family, they just didn't think about it either. They just thought, well, hospital knows best. Dad's 86, he's grown up. And they didn't really factor in that extra problem, which is dementia, because dementia is a real disability, and it's easy just to overlook it when somebody's in their own environment. Like if they're living in Keppelgate, you might just not notice. Move somebody out of a familiar place, and suddenly all the little structures that they're using to help themselves to cope, they're all gone. And so what happened to Nikki's father, who was such a nice man and never any trouble to anybody, he just sort of lay there. And of course, as nobody really knew him, they didn't know that it wasn't normal for him just to lie there. So they just thought, oh, well, this chap, he's 86, he's got dementia, he can't do anything else. And he was no trouble. He didn't shout or kick anybody, or he just lay there. And so quickly he lost his essential functioning. And as they saw him deteriorate, they thought, oh, we better stay a bit longer and have rehabilitation. But of course, it wasn't rehabilitation he needed. It was his family. And it was his familiar surroundings. And it was an absolute tragedy. He was in hospital. Nobody was, neglectful or unkind, but he was in hospital for nearly 5 weeks. And when he came out, he'd sort of lost everything. And the trouble with dementia, it's like your village post office. It's use it or lose it. If you don't keep on using those faculties, you're probably going to lose them anyway, but you can just keep on, and you can find different people with dementia are so clever. They find so many different strategies for coping. But these were all gone, and it wasn't very much after he came out of hospital. He had to have a live-in 24-hour carer, and even that really wasn't quite enough. And he died not quite 6 months later. And Nikki and I said to each other, if that had been one of our children in that hospital, never mind infection control, we wouldn't have been shut out. We would have gone in. We'd have done every sort of precaution, because we care more about our children or our old people than anybody else does. So, you tell us to wash our hands 50 times and stand on our heads, we'll do it. But anyway, so that's what we decided, that if somebody's in hospital they should always have access to their primary carer. It doesn't have to be the whole world and his wife, but the primary carer, who could have been Nikki, could have been Nikki's mother, could have been Nikki's brother, who was a GP. There should have been somebody there to support their father, to be able to tell the the nurses and doctors what he could do, and be able to help him continue to do it. And we never thought at that point. I mean, hospitals have been very good, and hospitals, have signed up, and they have understood the importance of this. And in normal times, pretty well every hospital trust, has made a pledge to John's campaign that they will welcome family carers. And that's an important thing for people to know. Otherwise, you can be very scared about somebody going into hospital. But as you know, Adam, we had never expected this to be necessary in residential care. But it turned out, and you've met lovely Brenda, who was the lady who really alerted us to this, that your social care sector is so big and it's so various. And there are some homes like Keppelgate, which are absolutely family homes and doing everything possible to normalize the environment, to welcome and listen to and act on the input of relatives. But sadly, there are others where they think, well, we know best, this person's been handed over to us, we'll take care of them now, thank you family, you can go away, we don't need you. And it's a sort of misunderstanding of professionalization, which we found we needed to challenge. And that's why John's campaign, it should be the same everywhere. Dementia is a disability wherever you are, whether you're in your own home or somebody else's home or hospital or a mental health assessment unit. You have a disability, you should have that extra bit of support that a family carer, if you're lucky enough to have one, which not everybody does, if you're lucky enough to have one, that person is like your guide dog. That person should go where other people cannot go. And I learnt this personally, and again, I know you know this because of the experience of my mother. And there's my mother. Oops, I'm not very good at holding this, but there she is. And so John's campaign sort of became June's campaign. And because the home where my mother eventually had to move to for the last 2.5 years of her life welcomed my involvement and, encouraged me to do everything that I wanted to do to continue to take care of my mother. When she came to the end of her life, which is here, she is in the last week of her life, she had dying isn't fun,
No.
We're all going to do it, but we're not looking forward to it necessarily. And dying with dementia isn't fun, which is what my mother died of, and not just with, but of. But because of the attitude of the carers and everybody else in that dementia nursing suite, and because of their welcome to myself particularly, but to all my family, my mother had the best end of life that she could have with that illness. And I can't say more than that. So there we are. That's John's campaign, which is also June's campaign. And we had hoped that since 2014, more understanding, had taken place of the particular nature of people with dementia. But it's not just about dementia, because there are many other vulnerabilities. And I just think dementia is a useful thing to think about, because if you get it right for people with dementia, you've got it right for a lot of people who may have hidden anxieties, hidden depressions, hidden, impairments that you don't know about. But get it right for dementia, and you can get it right for, lots of people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, the need for it in care homes has sort of come from like this myth that it's undignified for family to be able to provide care or to see care being happening, or for family to be involved. It's more professional for carers to be able to do that role and that job. And it's sort of like an unspoken truth. No one knows where it's come from. It's not the case. It's not the truth, but it seems to become an accepted fact within social care. So, Brenda's story sort of has highlighted it now for everyone, and we're all sat here going, well, actually, why can't family members be involved in providing that support.
If they want to be, if they want to be,
Yeah.
you know, there have to be choices, because very often if somebody's moving into residential care, it's because perhaps their elderly spouse is now just too exhausted and frail to manage any longer,
Yes.
or the dementia has reached a point, you know, where it's a 24-hour full-on thing, and no single person, you know, can manage with it. Certainly, I couldn't any longer cope with Mum. It was just, you know, her night times were just killing, and she was 60 miles away, and I was, I couldn't keep hurtling down, you know, the main road in the middle of the night, because Mum was suffering from extreme distress and paranoia. So at that point, for some people, it's perfectly fair to say, I'm exhausted. I can no longer deal with changing my husband's pad one more time. And that's fine. And that's the moment at which the care home steps in and says, that's fine. That's what we do. That's what we're here for. We'll do it. But if, like Brenda, you have been doing it for so long, you understand how your husband or your partner or your wife or your mother is feeling, and you want to continue, I think anybody with any sense will say, God, thank you so much. You know, that's great. Brenda's line was that the nursing home where her partner moved into, they said it was undignified for her to be in the room while his pad was being changed, let alone to help. She was already, you know, she was standing there on the other side of the bed, you know, putting on her gloves, ready to help. And they said, oh, no, you leave the room. And then she said, excuse me, you know, I've lived with this chap for 60 years. You know, I think I know what he looks like. Oh, and otherwise it's as if there's something repulsive about the older body or the body of somebody who's ill, and that's just wrong, because it's not. It's still a body. You know, it's not repulsive. It must be treated with great care and respect, and if you could also treat it with love because you love it, you know, hell, you know, why not? You were at Keppelgate. You were the first care home. I can't remember. You must tell me in a minute. I can't remember how it was that you got involved or how you heard of John's campaign, but you were the first care home to do two things. Firstly, to mention this sort of stigma, or I can't remember the word you used, but it was a taboo about personal care. Yeah. And to say we must really look at this. And you were also the first people to say it's not just at the end of somebody's time, at the end of their life in a care home, that their family should be welcome to come and stay with them if they want to. It's also perhaps when they're moving in, or at a period of illness and crisis. And you know, that's a real reduction of the boundaries. That was a really, how did you come, how did we get here, Adam?
Well, I think our thought on it is like you, everyone's got that choice whether they want to be involved or not be involved in someone's care to that capacity. But our view was, even if they don't want to be involved, they still have to feel like they can just walk through the door and it's still home. And even though that they don't want to be able to provide that care for that person anymore, they can still be in the room while it happens. It can still be normal day-to-day life. And I think adapting to moving into a home for some people can be, you know, pretty traumatic. It's a complete upheaval of environment. So what we say to people is, you know, moving like you're moving house. So make it as in like you're moving house and not just dropping someone off in a care home in an alien room. So stay over for a couple of nights, and that will help with any delirium, hopefully, of being in an alien environment. Similarly, if people are unwell, the last thing, I know my sister, again, it's young children, but if her kids are poorly, they're in bed with her that night and she doesn't leave the side, and that's that, because she wants to be able to be with them. So similarly for our parents, for our aunties, our uncles, whoever it might be that we've got in a care home, you know, we need to be able to feel like we can go and stay by their bedside no matter what if they're feeling unwell, because if I was unwell, I'd want someone by my side. So similarly, we should be able to allow that for everyone. So as much as before we pledged to John's campaign, we were always, we're open doors, you know, we're an open door visiting.
I'm sure you were,
Yeah, ever since we pledged, it was a case of we're open doors, and we'll also put up a bed for you and make you a brew, and you can have something to eat and stay a couple of nights if you want to. And I think that option for people is, again, it's an option that's there, so they feel reassured that that option's there and that option is available for them to use. We came across John's campaign. In fact, Karen, our proprietor, we were talking about this the other day when we were having one of our little business chats, and she was flipping through all of her old paperwork that way. And she's like me, a bit of a hoarder. We keep all these old paperwork bits. And there was a cutout of John's campaign from a magazine. And it was just like a little write-up about what John's campaign was. And I think it was around the same sort of time you were starting to venture into care homes and after Brenda's incident. And I think it was just, oh, I'll take it, drop Julia an email. And I think it kind of went from there and got some work put together. And then before you knew it, it was our first steering group in London with a follow-up this year. And, you know, we left that one in February thinking, well, this is great. You know, yes, we've heard some really sad stories today, but we're all invigorated. We're going to go out of this and we're going to change the world. Visiting's going to be absolutely fantastic. And then a month later, it's like COVID's here. No one can do anything. And it's sort of, I honestly feel some managers have either feel pressured to close the doors and abandon these ideals of visiting and keeping people connected. Some, like ourselves and many other managers that I know in my networks, have kept these ideals going and are looking at innovative ways to keep people connected. But how do you think the COVID crisis has affected visiting on a whole through care homes? Because you probably get a lot more communication from people reaching out and asking for help.
No, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. Nikki and I just feel at our wits' end. It's so distressing, and the distress, because I don't know if you noticed well, you wouldn't have noticed, but when I held up those little bits of paper, there's two things. One is that John's campaign is for the right of people with dementia to have their family carers with them, and also it's for the right of family carers to be with the person, and the anguish that has been suffered by families over this last 3 months and is continuing to be suffered is simply awful. I've never been so distressed by anything. And this is the, you know, when I say about the variability of the residential care sector, it is hugely variable. You know, it's variable in size and it's variable in approach. And, you know, there are still, you know, somebody said to me the other day, my care home manager said, I'm not going to be pushed around by relatives. I'm pushed around by relatives, you know, because that's what you lot did so well when you joined up. And it was actually well before that first meeting in London, because what you thought you'd do was start talking to your families and asking them their opinions and acting on them, and that's what I think is very valuable, because I'm sure almost all care homes will say, yeah, of course we welcome families, it's a pity they don't come, but you know, we welcome them. And what they're not thinking about is the invisible barriers. And so what you did, I think, when you had some of your first relative meetings, is you changed some of your language, you changed the way people enter the care home. You picked up on this sort of the intangible, the emotionals, and that's how you actually make a place welcoming. It's not just for saying, well, yeah, you come if you want, yeah, fine, yeah, that's right. You say, oh yeah, then and you know, let me welcome you in. Is it comfortable for you coming this way? You know, are you that's what you do, and that's what you did. And our meeting in London, you know, just before all this started out, was very much for I'm going to say it, the good care homes, to discuss the invisible things that might be holding people back from staying involved, because it's awfully sad. And I've heard many people say this, you know, that they've, you know, they have somebody living in their home and they know that the family are just sort of round the corner, and yet they don't come in. And you know, the care home managers ask themselves, why don't they come in? And you know, there can be many reasons for that. And of course, it's always going to be the family's choice, and you never know what's gone on in relationships in the past, so you can never judge anybody. But you can ask yourself, you know, is there anything I could do to make it easier for that person to come in? Well, of course, you know, with the lockdown, it's just tested everybody to the limit. And I'm sorry to say that I do think there are sometimes sort of power politics. This is my care home. You know, it's not the, you know, you don't live in our home, we work in yours. It's this is my patch, and it can be for I am going to. So the best bad example, if you like, is people saying, right, this is my patch. We're not having any COVID coming in here. Therefore, I'm not letting anybody across the door. I'm not going to let the district nurse across the door. I'm not going to let the GP across the door. I'm certainly not going to have those filthy families across the door.
Yeah.
And that can be, for a really, what is, basically a fierce protective instinct. And that's right. And I know, Adam, that you and your colleagues have a fierce protective instinct, because I've heard you rant about maybe it was I can't remember who it was, who came in already wearing their personal protective gear, and you said, excuse me, where have you been in that? And you've come out with really sensible ideas, like, okay, have a different set of clothes to wear, all this tremendous sort of fuss and commotion about, oh, well, I don't have umpteen changes of apron. Well, of course, you do need such things, but the simple thing of one set of clothes for in the care home and one set of clothes for going back to people's families also shows care for the families back at home, because the terribly sad thing that has happened, it's not just that carers, paid carers, care staff have inadvertently brought COVID into their places of work, which is just, desperately sad. But also, sadly, they've sometimes taken it out again into their own families. And that's just dreadful. All that having been said, people like me who used to be with my mother 4 or 5 hours a day, and I did, definite things, like I cleaned her teeth every night and morning. I was there every time she had to have medicine because she wouldn't have taken it from everybody else. I wouldn't have believed it if somebody said, well, actually, Julia, thanks, but as you're not paid, we don't need you. I thought, huh?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. And I just think we really nationally missed a trick at the beginning of this, as looking hard and thinking, okay, who are actually providing essential services? And they might be emotional services, or they might be practical services, like me cleaning mum's teeth, because she wasn't going to have anybody else in her mouth. So, chuck me out, and that's no, that's no oral care for my mother for 3 months. And that's not right. It's just not. So I think we should have said to families, okay, let's just look hard at this. Let's look at your own situation and your own vulnerabilities. Let's look at your own living situation. Are you actually naturally self-isolated, or are you in the middle, of a busy household? And what is it you do, and what are your choices, and what do you think that your loved one would want to do? Because some older people are very, very unselfish, I think, a lot of the time. They say, no, darling, of course, if it's better for you to stay away, you stay away. Of course they would. But we didn't have any of those conversations. And that's what's so wrong, because if you'd, we'll take me as an example, and we'll look at me as, call me staff support, if you like. And the things that I did were staff support. And my friends who are carers would agree that by the time my mother died, we were absolutely a team. Yeah. So if they're coming in, every day or however many shifts a week they do, I think just because I'm not paid, I think I should have been made to do all the same things that they did. If they were going to have their temperature taken every morning, if they were going to have to wear all this stuff, I think I should have had to do all the same things, and I should have been encouraged to come by car, which I did, and I should have been encouraged to be absolutely scrupulous about my isolation at home. But I don't think I should just have been turned away because I'm only family and I'm not professional. And I still think that.
Yeah, I think that's where I took real umbrage, is when they started classifying what was essential visits and what was non-essential visits, and the families fell into non-essential. I also think a lot of providers have suffered from not having enough local authority or government support and guidance around the situation, because there's just been sort of a static noise of nothingness throughout all of this.
That's good. Static noise of nothingness. Yeah, we like that.
But it's ridiculous how little information and support we've been given. I mean, I was even saying to some of our relatives, and we've had it in webinars, in little relative rendezvous, is, apply to be a volunteer. We could even look at getting you on our volunteer books, and then you're a volunteer within the company then. If it's going to be around bureaucracy, because I know a lot of homes are wanting to do what's best for everyone, but if we have those conversations to start off with, and we have them as a community conversation, because that's what we are at the end of the day. We're a home, we're a community, aren't we? So we have all of our rendezvous together. We have the discussions. Do we want to continue visiting? Yes, we do. Well, how do we want to go about it? What do we think is going to be safe? And we get everyone else involved in it. But there are so many innovative ways that we can get around, just instead of just stopping people coming through the door and welcoming people back. There's many innovations we can use. And like you say, we use the whole changing clothes before we come in as a decontamination procedure. And when families will be coming in for end of life visits, we'd be saying the same to them as well for coming into the home. I mean, I really hope it won't be long until we can start introducing more visits.
But Adam, there are still care homes who are not having any visits. This is terrible. The distress among relatives. That's what I meant. John's campaign is for the family carer, as well as how anybody can think it's all right to deny, a wife of 65 years to come in and be with her husband. I simply just think, in human terms, this is absolutely wrong in every way. And even that we need to think. I mean, I'm glad, of course, that there are garden visits and the new sorts of visits, and of course we all have to be thoughtful and careful, but thoughtful as well as careful. And a daughter got in touch with me the other day, and she said it was wonderful to be with my mother, and there we were in the garden, but she had an agency carer with her who didn't know her, who hadn't met her before, but the agency carer was allowed to hold her hand, and I was kept 2 meters away. I mean, what is that about? The daughter was she's actually a learning disability nurse, and she's a very sensible woman, but her distress has been such that she's actually had to take time away from work because the anxiety. Her mother is a woman of slightly younger than me with a rare dementia, who normally has to have one-to-one care. Her regular one-to-one carer, unfortunately, was trapped abroad at the time, so she lost her. The daughter, who is a learning disability nurse, was not welcomed to come in, was not welcomed even to have window visits. So this was the first time for so long. But the emotional strain on families has been massive, because somebody said to me, I feel as if I've dropped my mother off at nursery and forgotten to go back and pick her up. That suddenly, and there was a terribly sad article written for the British Geriatric Society saying that actually it's the people with the most attentive and nearby and involved families who in many ways have suffered the most, because suddenly that 5 days a week or 6 days a week or every morning or whatever it is suddenly gone, and the whole structure of their life is affected. And dementia is a disability. One of the things people with dementia need, as I know I don't have to say this to you or to your colleagues, is normality and routine and reassurance and safety. And so suddenly you whisk this out, you dress everybody up in, sort of fancy face masks, and you ask them to talk into a screen, and they see their daughter and they can't hug her. How is this going to help somebody? Yeah. Anyway.
No, it's true. It's true. And I think a lot of providers who maybe, because I have spoken to a number of people from the John's campaign group that we've got going on Facebook, who've not been able to go and see people, not even been able to have a Skype chat or a video call with people. And I just know that some of these providers who aren't allowing the visits will probably pride themselves in the fact that they've got the policies in place and everything's written and the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And I think the idea of surviving COVID is, like you say, literally just about not having it in the home. It's not thinking about the consequences of everyone else that we've got going. That's why we've created our virtual entertainment network, because it was a case of, well, we could say, well, we're not having entertainers in now, we're not doing this now, COVID's here, let's make sure that we're safe. And it was good, well, no, actually, no, stop. Activities are essential, families are essential. You know, that needs to continue no matter what. Not if we've got enough staff on, not if we've got enough time to be doing it. It doesn't get compromised. And life can't be compromised because of COVID. Yes, we've had to compromise. You know, I've not got to see my new, well, I've seen him now in the garden, but met my new nephew over WhatsApp for the first time instead of going around and seeing him in myself. So we've all made those sacrifices.
Yes.
But these people are living under our care, and we can make that life safe for them and make it easier for families to come in. And I just hope that more care homes start to adopt the principles of John's campaign. I hope that post-COVID, it's not a case of starting from scratch again and trying to build up the confidence.
COVID hasn't gone away, has it? I mean, we're not post-COVID. You know, actually, just because it's nice summer weather, and you know, I think everybody said that when the summer came, there would be a diminution in the strength of the virus. You know, it's going to come back. We're going to. So I think I'm going to some extent to take issue. I think actually we need to have some policies, but they need to be good ones.
Yes. They need to be person-centered. They need to be, like George Coxon would say, they need to be individualized, don't they?
Yes.
You know, we need to look at things on an individual level.
Well, that's what I and normally, you know, I'm not a writer downer of stuff, but I thought to myself, actually, in people's care plans now, there should be a sheet of paper called My Visiting Plan, and I haven't really sort of, you know, thought out the format. I think a care home manager should think this out. I was
going to say, I've got a document that we use as our care shielding and isolation thingy, and it talks about who our usual connections are, whether we've got connections in the care home that are usual, so not even just relatives that would normally come and see us. Who are we connected with in a care home that if we suddenly have to self-isolate from might make us feel a little bit forgotten as well? So it's not just about our outside connections, it's our inside connections. So what we've done is we've sat down and we've planned with them, who do you want to talk with? How often do you want to have these visits? Who's important to you in the care home that you want to be connected with as well? Yeah. And it's planning that for the future so that we can go, right, well, okay, COVID's going to resurge in winter. We know it's happening. We know it's going to come. So when it comes, it's just a case of flicking a switch and we're back into protection mode whilst also keeping people connected. You know, we're being pragmatic about it.
Because I think that so much of the sort of family care that I used to give, and I believe many other people also give, is invisible. The staff who are on, you know, the wing, I can't remember what, suite. We called it a suite. That's right. The staff who were on the suite, they knew, you know, when I came in every day, and they pretty well knew what I did, because I would give them a little bit of paper when I went out saying, by the way, mum's had, you know, 200 milliliters of water, or, you know, whatever she's had, because they needed to be able to put that sort of thing into their you know, into her records. But I think that there should be something written down to say that this was what I did, because, you know, a new manager or somebody wouldn't have a clue what was going on. And in the bigger care home settings, there's a huge disconnect between the staff in the suites or on the floors or whatever they call them, and the managers. And I just think that the contribution, it's like the unpaid carer, the family carer contribution in the community. There's a massive amount that families do, which is only relatively recently really been recognized and you know, a price put on it. And if people who do these sort of things through love for their relatives, or through duty, or through obligation, or whatever it is, are doing the right thing, and they're saving the country massive amounts of money, they're also doing something for themselves. It's not just, you know, giver and receiver. You know, I learned a huge amount from my mother through her dementia. And I also learnt a huge amount from the staff with whom I worked. But I think that in the situation that we're in, it'd be much safer for everybody if this was now written down for each person, who comes in, what do they do? And that counts, emotional support counts as well, because then you're suddenly in a crisis and you think, oh, whoops, right. Well, we're going to have to stop the footfall. We're going to have to reduce the number of visitors to our home. Let's just do a little bit of thinking and prioritizing and work this one out individually. Let's actually be person-centered, not just talk about it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I honestly completely agree. I don't think I could add anything more to that. It's really about embedding that culture within your service. There's so much to say. I mean, I know I'll always correct people and say we don't say residents, we don't say staff, we're family and friends. And I know there are so many places out there who'll go, oh, we call people this and we call people that. And it's not a gimmick per se, but it's a case of this is what we're trying to do to create that family atmosphere. Whereas ours is really cool because we have that family atmosphere. It's got to be a culture that everyone believes, and it's ingrained within all the team and with all the managers. Because, as I say, heaven forbid, I didn't go into Keppelgate and I couldn't go back to Keppelgate for a period of time. I'd want to know that ideology, that idea of what our care model is believed by everyone and not just from the top. So I think what we find in homes as well is once the manager goes or moves on to another post, all that hard work they've put in place disappears because it might not be truly embedded within the nature of the home as well. So we need to get a lot of work to put all that in place. And we're quite lucky to have this interconnected Jabber network with our NHS iPads, and we were doing quite a bit of work prior to COVID to get John's campaign in all the homes in the Filed on Wire, at least through using that tablet, and again hopefully trying to get it embedded as part of a culture within homes.
Because it should be so mutually supportive, shouldn't it? I think there's a couple of things in what you said. When you were saying if you were unable to come into Keppelgate, you would feel the most extreme anxiety. So you get, and it would probably start to get to you. I mean, I know if you'd taken a decision that because of your life, you needed to move on, you would have thought this. You would have thought it through. You would have done handover. You would keep in touch. You would have managed it. Like anybody who moves a job or who changes, has a life change in some way. But if you were just suddenly stopped, as many family members have just suddenly been stopped, you would be thinking about those people all the time. I mean, when my mum was alive, she was like a buzz in my head all the time. It was sort of an extraordinary feeling. It's like when you have young children, part of your brain is no longer part of your own brain. It's sort of deeply connected with that other person. And a lady said to me, she's on Facebook the other day, she said, I worry all the time. I'm elderly, I'm isolated. This is getting to my mental health. And that's not just somebody self-dramatizing. That's perfectly understandable. This field of anxiety, fear, guilt, jumping when the telephone rings, fretting when it doesn't ring. This is not good for people.
No, it's not. It's not. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think anxiety-wise.
Don't say that.
Well, no, I mean anxiety for because I nip to the shop and back, and that's pretty much all I do. And during the big peak of it, it was quieter. They limited how many people were in the supermarket, and it was safer and easier to be around. And then all of a sudden, everyone's coming back into the shops again. Everyone's shoulder to shoulder. No one's looking at the 2 meters, which is being reduced to 1 meter. And I think that's going to bring a lot of worry to people. Well, the one thing I don't understand, and this is probably a little bit off topic, is why everything's all of a sudden opening up to the extent that it is, and now they're finally allowing shielding people to come out more. Because surely, for mental health reasons, shielding people should have been given the first opportunity to be able to come out of the houses. And whilst everyone else was cooped up still, now all of a sudden everyone's back out in the community, and then we're suddenly bringing the shielding people out. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of acknowledgement of anxiety. And I think we do a lot with our team to encourage them to talk about it and just to phone us. I mean, my mobile phone my private mobile phone number used to be a private mobile phone number, and I used to turn my work phone off at 5 and turn it on at 8 in the morning. But now my work number's with all our family and all of our team, and it's 24/7. Much to my partner's dismay, can't stand the fact that my phone goes off all the time sometimes, but you need to have that open network and that open air of conversation to be able to go, if you're not okay, phone me, talk to me, because it's not just the people we're caring for. We care for everyone now. So let's all look after ourselves. Let's look after number one, and then we can look after everyone else as well.
Oh yes. You know, it's like sort of life-saving or something, isn't it? You know, it's no good leaping into the torrential river, you know, if you're going to get drowned as well, because that's not going to help.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
But you see, I think the trouble is it's something to do, and Nikki was talking about this the other day. It's something to do with the structure of social care, that it isn't like the NHS, because we're hearing from people who feel absolutely desperate. And who do they talk to? Who is there whose job it is to be like a hawk for the person living in residential care and their families? Who is it who is really looking at human rights and ethical issues here? Because in the health service, imperfect though it is, and there are lots of issues there at the moment, sort of, if you're really, really unhappy, there is sort of a system. And there's a sort of feeling that it is a statutory right. You know, there is an NHS constitution. There is various statutory rights and understandings, and social care doesn't have that.
No, it doesn't.
It's this muddle of private and public, which seems to have all the wrong emphases. And I hope that after this, I see no reason to be so optimistic. But what I would like to see is a better organisation, because, as you say, the lovely Vic Rayner at the National Care Forum, she said, you know, they're putting more effort into opening the British pub than opening the British care home. You know,
exactly.
This is true. You know, and there's no thought and understanding, and it's a specialist subject. You know, it's not, you know, unless you've had involvement, if you've had a relative living in social care, or if you lived in social care or worked in it yourself, you don't understand. But it's a massive, important sector which matters to all of us, because, you know, many of us are going to, you know, need to move in and be looked after, you know, at the ends of our lives, and we need it to be good. But at the moment, I think it's taken a massive step backwards, and I feel really, really upset about it, actually.
And I think this is what upsets me, especially when I spoke to Jacob Hawley from the BBC podcast, and he was asking me about whether we felt supported or not. And I said, and we were talking about the clap that happens every Thursday. Well, was happening every Thursday. And I said, look, it's nice, you know, people clapping for us, but the clap only matters if change follows. You know, there's no point clapping every Thursday if there is nothing to show for it at the other end of it. And I honestly think, especially our Prime Minister and a couple of other presenters who've called our sector unskilled and then stood there on the doorsteps and clapped every Thursday saying how amazing we are, to then find out that all the pubs are opening on July the 4th and there's still no official guidance for care homes to facilitate visiting.
There was just no mention of them. It was extraordinary.
No, exactly. And it just shows to me that, yes, we've embraced this clapping, which was absolutely fine, but the government haven't listened. Nothing's changing. Nothing's being thought of post-clap, if you will. So I think it is a real disheartening scenario that we've not got that added support. And I do believe that we need something overarching. I know we've got the CQC, the Care Quality Commission.
Well, they've been a bit quiet, I think. And I'm allowed, you can't say anything, but I'm going to say this because the beauty of John's campaign is there's only Nikki and me and Bertie and all the people who support us, but we're not paid by anybody. You know, we're not, nobody's giving us any money. Nobody's going to take our jobs away from us. We'd be delighted if you didn't need us anymore. But I have been quite shocked about the silence of the CQC through this, speaking as, you know, just an outside person. Joe Public, yep. And I read a World Health Organization advice sheet at the beginning of the pandemic. It was published at the end of March. And so many of the suggestions they made in that we've wantonly ignored. For instance, they were recommending deinstitutionalization. And, how hard has that been if somebody wants to take, their relative home for the duration? Quite often they've had to go and argue it in front of a judge, and then they've been turned down because they've been told they're not capable or something. But one of the things was absolutely clear in this World Health Organization document was that regulatory services, inspection services, should not hold back through a pandemic. They should be there, and they should be offering their advice and support. I think probably the CQC thought it was a kindly deed to step back, but it isn't, because it puts such a huge unfair burden, I think, on care home managers. Who do they talk to? I mean, maybe if they're in a great big company, they can talk to the area manager or the care quality control person or whoever it is. But if they're not, and they're getting conflicting messages from their neighbourhood, from their staff, from their residents, from their families, from Public Health England, they really needed somebody to be able to turn to and say, actually, this is what I'd like to do. What do you think? That's what they need. And they haven't had it.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I phoned our inspector up every single time that I've decided to do something. I'm doing this now. Okay, I'm going to send you it over in an email so you can have a look through it, because we don't want to be able to have to wait for things. But I think more than just CQC, I think there needs to be something really where people can go to, because CQC don't obviously look into individual complaints unless there's real reason or concern for safety. So to have something that is overarching that would look after all care homes and all relatives, I think would be ideal, especially for scenarios like this, for people, for them to talk to. Right, I'm not being rude, Julia, but we've gone over by 25 minutes. I just absolutely love talking to you, and I've just noticed that your video has frozen. This is the second time this has happened to us today. So I just really want to say, hopefully you can still hear this, a huge, massive thank you on behalf of Keppelgate for inspiring us over these last 3 years. It is now. Yes, I think we've lost Julia. But hopefully that people now have a better understanding of what John's campaign means to us, and how it has inspired us to change our model of care, and how we want to continue inspiring other care homes to follow in the same suit. If there are relatives or anyone really watching this, the one thing I would say to really take away from this is, once visiting is better in hospitals, just remember that the local hospitals have pledged to John's campaign, so there's no reason why you can't ask for that visiting right if someone has got dementia. So just make sure that you always do know your rights, and always talk to your care homes as well, and ask them the questions, and provide them that support. I think we might be able to get Julia back in just for a goodbye. I was just saying, if we get you back in just for a goodbye.
I don't know whether. No, thank you so much, Adam, and thank you to all at Keppelgate, and also in the wider area. Thank you so much, and best of luck.
Thank you so much, and hopefully it won't be too long until we can all get back together again. See you later. Bye.